Welcome, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this special sneak preview and introduction to our newest module for Network Detective, the SQL Server Assessment. I am Sarah McElmurray with Rapid Fire Tools. Joining us today on the webinar is Mark Winter, VP of Sales for Rapid Fire Tools, and Win Pham, Director of Development for Rapid Fire Tools. Before we begin with today's content, I'd like to cover a few basic logistics. Because we have such a large number of attendees on today's webinar, we have muted all phone lines to reduce any background noise. If you are experiencing any technical issues, please notify us using the chat box on the right side of your screen. There will be a Q&A session at the conclusion of the presentation, but please feel free to enter questions as they come to you. Also, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available within a day. Just to set everyone's expectations and make sure you've come to the right place, this webinar is tailored specifically for our existing Rapid Fire Tools Network Detective customers. Mark's going to start us off and spend a few minutes talking about the benefits and use cases for the SQL Server Assessment tool. Next, we're going to turn it over to Win, who will walk us through some of the new reports. At the end of the session, we will present a very special one-time offer with a link to a special order page with some excellent discounts, and an opportunity for you to get additional savings if you act quickly. We're going to go ahead and get started with today's content, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark. Mark?
Hey, thanks very much, Sarah, and welcome everybody. We certainly appreciate your taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. As Sarah mentioned, this is a special sneak preview just for our existing subscribers to Network Detective. So without further ado, let me get going. We'll try and wrap this up in 15-20 minutes of prezo, do some Q&A, and get you back to your jobs. Before I got into the SQL module, I did want to just kind of remind everybody some of the things that we've done over the last 6 to 8 months, just in case you haven't seen these. Bring them to your attention. We do trade shows, and a lot of times I show Inform, and people didn't realize that that was even added to the product. I'll show you that in a minute. We've also got a brand new XP migration report that was added to the network assessment module. That's available immediately. I'm told it's great, and people are making a lot of money using this to help them scope and document what needs to be done in both prospect and client engagements, to make that April deadline. Also, if you haven't already checked it out, please make sure you're taking a look at the new enhanced branding. There's a bunch of different layouts that you can use. You can select from color-coded color templates, or even use your own colors. Use additional logos. Will really help you stand out, and we're told that people really love it because it helps them make the look and feel of the report covers closer to their own branding. Also, for those of you who are the security reports are considering it, we added 3 new reports that focus on the login success and failure. So you get login success and failure by user and by computer in 3 different ways, from the interactive console, remote or RDP login, and also net login, so you can determine who's using what, who's attempting to accessing what. And if there's a lot of failures against the CEO or CFO of a customer, that tells you a lot too. And there's finally one final report, which is just the failures only on a computer basis, which is a much shorter version. Here's what Inform looks like. The way that this is designed, let me back up. We have the automated data collector that does a great job of gathering a lot of information about the network's security, Exchange, and now SQL, of course. But there's certain things that no data collector at all is able to gather information on, like what, you may ask. Things like what does the server room look like? Are the servers in racks? Are they on the floor? Is there security to the server room? Is it locked? Is it an electronic lock? Do they have a BYOD policy, and what is it? So the idea here is you start off with a template. There's one built into the product that you can start with. You can customize that, add your own headings like server room, or topics within it, like add picture, equipment layout, things like that. So when you're on site, you do the data collection, let it run, and now you've got a more formal and organized method for gathering other key information. When you come back in, you'll transcribe that information back into the Inform feature, and that's where you'll then generate 2 reports. We call it the Site Interview Response Report, And this is what then becomes a customer-facing document, with your information. And of course, it includes pictures. Pictures are certainly worth 1,000 words when it comes to showing somebody the job that their current IT is or isn't doing for them. And also, you can key things as a strength, weakness, opportunity, or threat as you import those. And we generate an extremely helpful IT SWOT analysis. It really helps you stand out, helps elevate you from just an IT company or group to more of a business IT level. A lot of people absolutely love this stuff. The XP migration tools. So, of course, there's the summary, the readiness summary that you get. Identifies the number of upgrade candidates and those which are not. And then you get the details where you might need to drill down and find more. All of this is available to you today. If you're not using it, certainly encourage you to do so. Okay, so let's talk about the reason you're here, and we're extremely excited to be announcing our SQL Server Assessment Module. It's brand new, and it's a great way to maintain and document your customer SQL servers, and also if you're doing things for prospecting and they've got a mission-critical SQL server running, why not use it there too to see if there's any potential issues you can help sell against. So what this is for, it's really to help you better maintain your client's SQL environment, and like I said, identify issues at both customer and prospects. Like all of our other modules, it's really simple and easy to use. And it's valuable for things like on-premise, SharePoint, third-party applications like accounting, business intelligence, EMR, and of course for bespoke or custom applications that ride on top of SQL Server. If any of you have DBAs on staff, they'll certainly love it for the enormous amount of time it'll save them in the gathering, analyzing, and reporting on those environments. The reports, of course, are automatically generated and really help you identify threats as well as assess the health of the databases. So it's great to help satisfy, ongoing reporting requirements to upper management or, to the primary contact at your clients. It's also very valuable to your technicians who might not be DBAs, but who, might be tasked with maintaining or at least reporting on a SQL Server database. This way, if you don't have DBAs, one of your technicians can really assess the issues, document the environment for your clients. It can help unlock additional revenue opportunities for you, and I think really differentiate you from your competition in the marketplace. So the way it works, just like any of our other tools, there's the data collector. There's one specific to SQL. It's fast, easy to run, non-invasive, and of course then you import the data, create and brand the reports like you normally would do. So running the SQL data collector. This can be run from any PC or server on the network that's able to connect to the SQL Server. You'll supply the SA or equivalent credentials. Like I said, it's completely non-invasive. We're using read-only selects and queries, and you can certainly do this during business hours. There's no need to do it outside of business hours. And it's very fast. Typically it's 1 to 2 minutes for most SQL servers, and the size of the databases matters less than the number of databases within the SQL Server. So if you've got clients or prospects with a lot of data, hundreds of gigabytes, terabytes, that's less important, like I said, than if there were 30, 40, 50 databases. It's the number of databases that really makes the difference here. So your clients really do depend on the availability of the apps that are running against SQL Server for their critical day-to-day operations. So the benefits here, it'll really help you verify the health of the environment, identify performance bottlenecks, and even locate more severe problems that could pose business risks. Examples of performance issues include tables that might be missing indexes, which, of course, if you did index them, could really speed up the searches and make those apps faster and more responsive. It can identify, databases that are highly fragmented, which, of course, if you defrag them, could also improve the overall performance and data of the database and operations. Example of critical business risks that it could identify, could include, of course, backup jobs that are not executing successfully, which then, are certainly putting business-sensitive data at risk in the event of a catastrophe. Or, since a lot of databases do require pre-allocated space, it can help identify databases that are growing faster than expected. That way you can either fix the underlying problem or allocate more space. So there are 5 reports that are included in the SQL Server Assessment module, And I'll go through these here very briefly, but then I'm going to turn it over to Win Pham, who's going to actually show you some of the sample reports, go through the areas of importance, and really, I hope, wow you with what's going to be available to you. So the routine health report. This is designed for regular and ongoing reporting. It provides a high-level overview of the SQL Server environment, shows the health and issues. And this is great for providing to managers, business owners, whoever the stakeholder is at your client organizations. And it's really designed for the non-technical person. The idea here is to regularly document the health of the environment, and we've got some easy-to-read charts and graphs designed for the layman so that you can regularly show them the health of the environment is good, or if there are problems, you can put together a project to address it. And even if you're not addressing it yourself, you might have 1099s that you can rely on, upcharge, and again, it's a nice way to have some additional revenue and bottom line. So the SQL Server Detail Report, the second report, this provides information on the SQL Server environment as opposed to the databases. And this information includes configuration of the SQL Server, the hardware it runs on, state of the backups, and more. You then get the Database Detail Report, and this provides in-depth information on each database in the SQL Server, things like the indexes, table locks, fragmentation, and more. This also serves as great documentation for disaster recovery. I mean, if there's ever a problem, you'll have all the information necessary to rebuild from the ground up. Then there's the Maintenance Plan Report, and this shows the maintenance plans available, including the tasks like reindex, backup, etc., as well as any sub-plans. And finally, there's the Agent Job Report, which shows the history of the jobs that were recently executed, the name, what it's supposed to do, and the outcome. And it'll show you any exceptions, like backups not running, along with the results or issues so that you know what to do. So at this point, let me turn this over to Win Pham, who will kind of go through some of these reports with you. Win, you there?
I'm here, if you can hear me.
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
All right, well, I'm going to switch it over to myself. And I'm going to share my screen. At least I hope. Here we go. Mark, just to confirm,
Perfect.
You can see my screen? Great.
I
This
can
is the
indeed.
This is the routine health report. It's the kind of like the risk reports, but we're taking it from a health point of view rather than a risk point of view when it comes to the SQL Server. So it's the same kind of branding you're used to, table of contents, a little bit of text about it, and then we get into just a quick summary about the SQL Server itself, what the SQL Server is, what version's on, number of jobs, different databases on it, the data size, and the log size. The SQL Server health indicators, kind of like what your health indicators you see in the risk report, are now divided into an overall health score and then broken down to individual categories related to settings, files, resources, and the SQL Server agent in terms of whether or not it has problems in those particular areas. So rather than giving an overall score that is a little bit too nebulous, we're breaking it down to smaller entities. And by the way, we're going to bring this into the other reports that we have as well into the future. The SQL Server Health Detail, we're going over to the different sections. Now, settings, for instance. So these are what we have for the Microsoft best practices for how things should be set up. It doesn't, the only thing you'll notice is that we never say something is completely red or green because we're just saying it's okay, or there could be a potential issue because there might be a legitimate reason for having these settings set differently. So for instance, right here, the backup compression is not enabled. And then we actually put a recommendation here, a note about it telling you that backup compression can help save the size on the target drives by compressing the backups to reduce the time for the backup windows. And like we say, in most cases, this is desired. It might be different in your particular case. We go down to the files health. You'll see that what we have here, data file log placement. You'll see that they're on the same drive. This, if there's only one drive in the machine, then obviously this is going to be the case, but it's not necessarily the most desirable because you can cause I/O congestion if they're on the same drives. File placement, the data files are not on the OS drive. That's a good thing. The temp DB is not on an isolated drive by itself. Basically, since the temp DB is going to be written to all the time, having it on its own drive will help increase the performance of the SQL Server database. Once again, you have to take it with a grain of salt and explain to your customers as well that all these things are kind of situational. You might be on a system that is very old, doesn't have additional drives, doesn't have the kind of space, but it is a good conversation starter for that. Available disk space trend, 90-day projection. So we project out there, we see that you're going to have sufficient amount of disk space. And then we look at I/O stalls to see if you need more CPU to process the I/O. Over here, resource health, looking for just a couple categories of resource health. Signal weights, we'll see that they're above 10. This is a major indicator that you might need more CPU power, or you might need to rewrite some of the queries or have a DBA look at it, or the application writers look at your application, how it interacts with the database. Average current tasks, always less than 10. Physical memory, we determined that it's sufficient for operating your database. Then you'll see here SQL Server agent health. This is for basically, it's a SQL Server agent running in the first place. And do we have any kind of failed jobs? Basically, it's a quick way of just knowing that the major components of the system are running the way it should be. Let me go ahead and go into the next report, which is the SQL Server detail report. This is, instead of about the databases themselves, this is about the SQL Server as a whole. So we have in there system information, cluster information, hardware information, and so on. So I'll go over these different sections with you real quick. System information, here's a database on a machine called DB02. It is on a Windows 2008 R2 machine. It is not in a cluster. This will identify whether or not it's in a cluster and provide the cluster information. Hardware, it's running on a Xeon processor machine, 8 logical CPUs, 4 physical ones with 12 gigs of RAM. And I'll show you when the SQL Server will start. Then we go through, and this is very kind of routine, but we just basically document all of the current SQL Server values. And you'll notice that there's a value and a value in use. The value is where you set the value for. The value in use is what is currently being used inside the SQL Server at the time. So it's possible in a SQL Server environment to actually set a setting and have it not be that setting in practice. And that could be because the database server might need to be restarted or some other reason. So you see here that all the settings are documented. Now, if you think about this from a documentation point of view, think about it in terms of your DR kind of plans. And you might have backups of all the databases and everything, but when you bring up the database server again, if you had to bring it up fresh and new, you want to reconfigure it the same way it was configured before, and this will provide you with that documentation. The next part is to go through the different databases. We show here building out the databases online, the recovery model, where the files are located, which is very important, and the number of rows and sizes of the databases and log. So you see here for the databases, we'll show you the number of rows that are represented and then the size. Excuse me, without locking, I'm sorry. Input and output. So this is going through the I/O for the SQL Server as a whole. Which databases are consuming the most I/O? Where are the stalls at? Where are the number of reads? Where the number of writes are at? And then the total I/O as well. So you can help identify on a database server. There might be 1 or 2 databases that in particular are the noisiest ones. They might be the ones that are blocking the most, and it's good to know the nature of it, whether it's a write-oriented database or a read-oriented database or a read-write database, because that might determine the way and the types of file system that you put it on, or it might determine what type of RAID drives you might want to put to support the database behind the scenes. So let me go further to this, and this is CPU. This breaks down the CPU by the different databases, basically in terms of all the CPU that's being used by the SQL Server. What is the amount of CPU time that's being used by each individual database? So you can see here that these 2 databases are heavily used the most, this one in particular, but the reporting server actually has in there very limited use comparatively. Let me go further down here. You'll see CPU utilization in the last 4 hours. It's showing you all the CPU utilization in the last 4 hours. And this is just a small snapshot just to see if it's steady, if it's low, if it's high on the actual machine itself. Physical memory. This is showing you how much physical memory is being used by all other things on the machine and SQL Server. Then right here we break down the actual values. Weight types. basically where is all the time being spent while it's waiting, while it's not doing active work. And you see here in write log, it's spending a lot of time waiting there, and it has the percentage broken down to the different areas and tasks. And then over here, this tells you the number of average tasks running, and then pending I/O. Now this is one of my kind of favorite graphs to take a look at. Is basically how do the database sizes of backups fluctuate over time. And this might be because you're deleting rows, you're maintaining the database differently. You can see which databases are very steady, which ones fluctuate the most, and which ones are very minimal in terms of the amount of the backup size. And we see here the backup sizes, the compressed sizes, and the ratios. Logins, this shows you just the basic logins for the test database that we ran over, but it will enumerate out the logins for the SQL Server itself. Then we move into the actual databases themselves. So this report here is on the actual database detail. We're going to go database by database and look at each database. So this report, depending on, like Mark said, the more databases you have, the longer the collection will take because of the number of databases, not the number of rows in it. So for each one of these databases, we give you the database properties. We tell you if there's any missing indexes, and the properties basically have on there log size used. We'll highlight in red if there's, of course, you're running out of space of a certain type. Table locks will tell you what kind of table locks have been enabled onto the database itself. Statistics, have these tables been updated recently? And this one is a bad example, but the next database I'm going to show you here actually has a little bit of data in it. So when I go over to missing indexes, it'll list here some missing indexes. It'll tell you if there's an index advantage by getting into the indexes. And over here, you'll see that you have the different tables. And let's see. And over here, the storage, the average user impact, and all. And you can actually use this to help you decide whether or not you should add these indexes. And just to let you know, it's not always appropriate to have to add indexes into your system because there might be cases where adding an index may increase seek time, but may really hurt you in terms of insert time. So that's where having a little bit of knowledge about the databases themselves will actually, and their use cases will help out as well. Table locks. This goes over the different table locks, when it's created, which tables they're latest created on. Excuse me. Statistics. This is another thing to point out to customers. Basically, if a database is decently well maintained, statistics are normally updated on a regular basis. And what we try to do is try to highlight for you anything that's kind of not an index that's ever used. So here are some indexes that have never been updated with statistics, but you'll see that they have no rows in them at all. Going over here, this goes for some more indexes. And then you see here for fragmentation, you'll see that we highlight some in red and some in red bold, basically telling you the amount of fragmentation in the database themselves. And basically, the best practice normally is that resolving anything that has fragmentation greater than 50%, normally it helps increase performance significantly. And then we go again to more indexes. Now I'm going to go over, since I'm going quickly over this, going over to the maintenance plan section, and then I'll start answering some questions. The maintenance plan section over here has basically your listed maintenance plans for the SQL Server database found inside of the maintenance plan area. And plans are made up of subplans, and this is what we document in here as well. So if there's multiple subplans, it will be listed into this part. This isn't actually where it's run, but it's just listing and documenting the maintenance plans. We do pull information from the SQL Server agent and bring it into here, such as the last runtime, so that you can actually get a sense of when this plan was actually last executed. Typically, the maintenance plans are independent of actually the running. To get the amount of run, how the jobs are being run, or if there's problems, we have the SQL Server agent jobs report. In the jobs report, we go through each of the individual jobs. So a test plan might be, a maintenance plan might be made up of several subplans, and each of these subplans are made up of several steps, and they could have individual schedules to run on as well. So we document all of this for you. Then we go here, and then we show you in here the job history. We highlight in red if there's ever an error in executing that kind of plan. And we highlight that log message as well. I'll go to the next plan over here. And you'll see where the job history, there's no data for this job, but this job right here has successful executions and is not highlighted in red. So this will allow you, as a combination, to basically see what the database is doing and be able to see what type of, how the SQL Server agent jobs are running or not. And so we're trying to bring out just kind of like the major problems that could occur, and in terms of configuration, and also provide you with a way to do documentation and routine reporting. What this is designed to kind of do is, if you have a database under contract of any type, to provide you with a way of providing that monthly reporting needs that you do. Now, one thing special about database maintenance is, if you do a great job, your RMM system will never pick it up because you'll never get an alert or alarm on it. It's only when you fail that there's going to be a problem. But if you're doing some type of managed database service, you want to show your customer that you're doing something for them every month. You're looking into it at least and checking on their health, which is what you're doing. And that's what the SQL Server Assessment module is designed for. I'm going to pass this back over to Mark right now. And after I do, I guess he has a couple more things to say, and then we'll be glad to answer some questions.
At this point, I'm going to leave this screen up while Win and I kind of go over some of the Q&A.
Yeah, I think the first question was basically what versions of SQL Server we cover. And it covers, basically 5, 8, 12, and the different revisions in between. Some other questions here. Do you report on SSIS jobs? Yes, the SSIS jobs would be included with the SQL agent jobs. Let's see. The question is, when will the SQL Server report generator be added to the Network Detective client? The data collector is already on the website. Right now, it's actually in the version that is currently downloadable, has the SQL Server report generator already in it. It just has to be enabled by purchasing the module, and it should come up in the next login.
Let's see.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, we can hear you. So other questions. Will it do MySQL or SQL Express? And the answer is no. It's currently just for the full SQL Server.
Yeah, SQL Express it should actually report on the data for, but MySQL definitely not. We are looking into building. Okay, so it might
work on Express.
Yeah, we're looking to build in change reports as well. So that's something that's coming up in the near future. The other question is, how does it handle multiple SQL Server instances on one server? Basically, you'll connect the database server over the SQL Server port, and it should pick up whatever is listing on whatever port that is. So it's port-based as opposed to instance name-based. So if you had them all listening, you would probably use the network configuration, for the SQL Server to have it listing on slightly different ports if you have multiple instances. Like if you had a SQL Server Express along with a SQL Server on the instance as well. Let me see, running through the questions here. How many days are used in the calculation of the different counts? That I don't rightly know. Typically, what happens is the SQL Server collects its own metrics. So instead of inquiring the metrics, such as CPU space and everything, from the OS itself, it's acquiring it through SQL Server. And SQL Server keeps accounts depending on how active the SQL Server is. So if you have a very active SQL Server and it's doing metrics, it rolls off metrics at a period of time. So it's very difficult to say how far the metrics go back. We do have that those kind of values, but we don't have the actual range of the time frame. Let's see if I have any other kind of questions that, let's see, statistical stopping here. In the initial report, it says it was unable to calculate the available space. Let me take a look at that report and see what that was, which that was for. Let's see. Oh, unable to determine if you have enough sufficient available disk space on the machine. If it's connecting to the machine and it's a SQL Server version that's less than, I think, 8, then disk space was not automatically reported remotely. And that's something that we're working on to try to address with WMI, to be able to pull back those values to populate that in. But anytime that we can't find information, we always document for you what we can't find, so that it's a way to basically have a red light and indicator that you guys can come in and take a look at it. But like I said, in any kind of version of SQL Server that is, I think actually even before R2 won't have that value available. Microsoft has been adding in a lot more management and reporting capabilities into their various products, and basically with SQL Server R2 and up, it's been doing a very good job giving you all those. I think I've captured most of this. Mark, I think the only other question is basically, is the report recorded?
Yes, the answer is yes. This is being recorded. It should be up either late today or tomorrow sometime if you need to share this with any other colleagues or people in your organization. Let me reiterate again. Somebody indicated the website doesn't show pricing. Our main website may not, but if you'll go to that URL, I tested it earlier. It certainly did for me. But we will check it again. Let's see. What was I going to say? Definitely want to remind you that this very special web pricing is going to be available just through tomorrow. I am not going to be able to extend that even to Thursday or Friday. It's going to be what it is. Now, somebody else is saying it's not working. So maybe a lot of people hitting it at once. Please try again, because I know it did work earlier today.
I think one of the issues might be you have to log in order to see the custom pricing, and that might be something to try.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you, Wynn. Yes, since this is for existing customers only, you do need to make sure you click you log in when you go through that page, and it will then present you basically with that same panel or form that you see on your screen right now. Somebody else mentioned it's a 0, not a capital O. But I think if you click through the URL that's on that's in the chat box, that should take you right to it as well.
And I just verified, and it actually works, Mark. So I think it's more of the O versus the 0. So I'm glad everything works.
Could be. Fantastic. Well, listen. At this point, we're a little bit past the half hour. We were trying to keep this to about half an hour. I want to thank everybody who came. One, for your business. We certainly appreciate working with each and every one of you. And also for taking the time to see what's new with SQL Server. I do see a lot of people have ordered already, so thank you for that. And if you have any questions, just please give us a call. I or any of our sales team will be able to help you. We're at 678-323-1300, extension 2 for sales. So thank you all very much.